Ancient humans ate almost everything. Insects, rotting meat, animals twice their size. They were not picky, but one bird kept showing up around every ancient camp, stealing food, outsmarting every trap, and somehow never ending up on the menu. The crow. Not because ancient humans never tried, but because every time they did, something stopped them, and the reasons are darker than you would ever expect. First, you need to understand something about crows that most people do not know. Crows did not just exist near ancient humans. They followed them. Everywhere ancient humans went, crows went too. When ancient hunters made a kill, crows were there within minutes. When ancient camps produced waste and leftover food, crows were the first to arrive. When ancient humans buried their dead, crows circled overhead. For hundreds of thousands of years, wherever humans lived, worked, and died, crows showed up. Researchers studying crow behavior found something that explains this perfectly. Crows are one of the only animals on Earth that deliberately follow apex predators, not to compete with them, to benefit from them. They learned early that wherever humans went, food appeared. So they stayed close, and ancient humans noticed this. They watched crows constantly, not as a food source, as something else entirely. Something they could not quite explain but could not ignore. But before we get to that, there is a much more practical reason why ancient humans avoided eating crows. And it starts with what crows actually eat. Crows eat everything. And that is exactly the problem. A crow's diet reads like a list of things you would never want inside your body. Dead animals in advanced stages of decay, rotting fish, maggots, the internal organs of carcasses that have been sitting in the sun for days, feces from other animals, garbage, parasites, whatever is available and whatever requires the least effort to consume. This matters enormously for anyone thinking about eating a crow, because everything a crow eats goes into its tissue. And ancient humans who ate animals containing high parasite loads got sick, sometimes fatally sick. They did not understand parasites in the scientific sense, but they understood the pattern clearly enough. Eat the wrong animal, get violently ill, watch someone in your group die from it. Remember that animal forever. Crows are scavengers at the top of a very dirty food chain. Everything toxic, parasitic, and diseased that they consume concentrates inside their bodies. Ancient humans who occasionally did eat crow, and some did during desperate periods, frequently reported becoming ill afterward. That pattern was noticed. It was memorable, and it was passed forward. There is also the taste. Hunters and researchers who have eaten crow in modern times describe it consistently. Dark, tough, gamey meat with a strong, unpleasant flavor that comes directly from the diet of the bird itself. Unlike chicken or duck, which eat grain and insects and produce mild, tender meat, a crow that has spent weeks eating rotting carcasses tastes exactly like what it has been eating. Ancient humans had access to deer, rabbit, fish, boar, and dozens of other animals that tasted better, carried less disease, and were easier to catch. Crow was never the obvious choice when other options existed, but other options did not always exist. And even during the hardest times, something beyond practicality kept ancient humans away from crows. Here is something that ancient hunters discovered quickly and never forgot. Catching a crow is genuinely one of the hardest things you can do with a trap. Crows are not just intelligent. They are intelligent in a way that directly targets human attempts to catch them. Researchers studying crow cognition found that crows can recognize individual human faces and remember them for years. A crow that has seen a specific person set a trap will avoid that person and warn other crows in the area. They communicate specific threats to each other with distinct calls that carry detailed information about the type of danger and its location. In one famous study, researchers wearing specific masks while handling crows found that wild crows in the same area began dive bombing and harassing anyone wearing those masks months later, including people who had never interacted with crows before. The information had been shared through the crow population. The face had been remembered. The threat response had been taught. Ancient human hunters setting traps for crows were dealing with an animal that could identify them personally, remember them indefinitely, communicate their presence to other crows, and teach younger crows to avoid the same person. A deer does not know your face. A rabbit does not warn other rabbits about you specifically. A crow does all of this and more. Ancient hunters who repeatedly failed to catch crows while easily catching other animals began to see the crow differently. This was not just a bird. This was something that they understood them, something that watched them and learned from them and communicated about them. In a world where ancient humans projected meaning onto everything around them, a bird that behaved this way was not going to end up as dinner. It was going to end up as something far more significant. Here is where the story takes a turn that explains more about ancient humans than almost anything else. Crows have a documented behavior that researchers only fully understood in recent decades. When a crow dies, other crows gather around the body. Large groups of them, silent, watching. Sometimes for extended periods before dispersing. Scientists studying this behavior found that it is not mourning in the human sense. Crows are gathering information. They are trying to understand what killed the dead crow so they can avoid the same fate. They are essentially holding a group investigation into a death. But ancient humans watching this behavior did not have that scientific explanation. What they saw was a group of birds gathering silently around a dead member of their own kind, observing, remembering. That looked familiar. Because it was what humans did too, in almost every ancient culture that researchers have studied, crows appear consistently in connection with death. Not because ancient humans invented this connection randomly, because crows genuinely showed up wherever death occurred. Battlefields, burial sites. Wherever human or animal bodies lay, crows arrived quickly and gathered in numbers. Ancient humans saw crows at every death they ever witnessed. Over hundreds of thousands of years, that association became absolute. The crow was the death bird, not symbolically, practically. It was always there when death arrived, and you do not eat the death bird, not because of a rule anyone wrote down. Because something deep in the human mind resists consuming the animal that has become the face of the thing you fear most. Across ancient cultures that had zero contact with each other, separated by oceans and thousands of years, the crow kept appearing in the same role. Messenger between the living and the dead. Guide for souls leaving the world. Symbol of knowledge that exists beyond normal human understanding. In ancient Norse culture, the god Odin kept two crows named Hugin and Munin, meaning thought and memory. They flew across the world every day and returned to tell him everything they had seen. The crow was the eyes of the divine. In many Native American traditions, the crow was a creator figure. A trickster who existed between worlds and carried knowledge that ordinary creatures could not access. In ancient Celtic culture, the crow appeared on battlefields as a supernatural presence connected to fate and death. In ancient Japanese tradition, a three-legged crow was a messenger of the gods. These cultures never met. They never shared stories or religious traditions. And yet, they all arrived at the same conclusion about the same bird independently. The crow was something other than an ordinary animal. It existed in a space between the natural and the supernatural. Ancient humans who held these beliefs were not going to eat an animal they considered a divine messenger. You do not cook and consume the symbol of a god you are trying to stay on good terms with. The spiritual protection around the crow was as real to ancient humans as any physical barrier. And here is the most interesting part of all of this. The crow earned that status, not through mythology, through behavior. Everything ancient humans believed about crows was based on something real they had observed. The intelligence was real. The death association was real. The communication between crows was real. The ability to recognize individual humans was real. Ancient humans looked at this bird and built a belief system around what they actually saw. And what they saw was genuinely extraordinary. Everything ancient humans sensed about crows, without being able to explain it, modern researchers eventually confirmed with science. Crows pass the mirror self-recognition test, one of the only animals that can do this alongside great apes, dolphins, and elephants. It means they recognize themselves as individuals. They have a sense of self. Crows use tools. They have been observed bending wire into hooks to retrieve food from inside containers, dropping nuts onto roads and waiting for cars to crack them open, placing objects in specific sequences to solve multi-step problems. Crows plan for the future. They hide food in specific locations and remember those locations for months. They have been observed hiding food differently when they think another crow is watching, suggesting they understand that the other crow might steal it. That requires understanding what another individual knows, which requires a theory of mind, something scientists previously believed only humans possessed. Crows hold grudges for years. They teach their young which specific humans to fear based on past experiences with those individuals. The cultural transmission of learned information across generations is one of the defining characteristics of what we consider intelligence. Ancient humans could not explain any of this in scientific terms, but they lived alongside crows long enough to observe all of it directly, and they responded the same way any intelligent species responds to another intelligent species. With a combination of respect, caution, and a very strong instinct not to eat it. So here is the full picture of why ancient humans did not eat crows. The meat was poor quality and carried disease from a lifetime of eating the worst things available. The bird was almost impossible to trap because it recognized individual humans and warned others. It appeared at every death ancient humans ever witnessed and became permanently associated with mortality itself. And it demonstrated a level of intelligence that ancient humans recognized without being able to name, triggering a respect response that placed it outside the category of normal prey. Every reason stacked on top of the last one: biology, practicality, observation, belief. All pointing in the same direction, the crow was never just a bird to ancient humans. It was the animal that watched them back, the one that remembered their faces, gathered at their deaths, communicated about them to others, and seemed to understand things that ordinary animals simply did not. You can eat an animal you do not understand. Ancient humans ate plenty of those, but the crow understood them, and somewhere deep in the ancient human mind, that changed everything. If this makes you see a bird you walk past every day in a completely different way, subscribe. Every video on this channel does exactly that.